G'day, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to go through a video, as suggested in the title, about high tech. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about the electronic side, the computer, the algorithm side of our shooting sport. There's a few angles I want to go at that conversation, but also, I suppose, painting the picture of where I'm coming from. To start off with, there's the high-tech side of it in the way of better glass or better features or better barrels or actions or whatever type of thing. That sort of things. Listen, I'm all on board with. While we fine-tune that sort of stuff, we're largely working with the same stuff that's been around for over 100 years, and we're fine-tuning it. Smarter ideas and better materials and all that sort of stuff can certainly take it to the next level. But the mechanical side of things and the engineering side of things, I think, is listen, great, awesome, and there's really no negatives to that sort of stuff within reason. Keeping in mind that you're on a ever diminishing return for results, or results in the money for value. In saying that you can get very good money for value in a basic factory thing or in basic bits and pieces. And then as you spend more money with more refining and going further in spending lots of money, there's only small gains, although they may be necessary gains as you step things up there. But when it comes to the electronic side of things, so I'm largely talking about be them apps, be them PDAs, be them computers that you're working with for firing solutions and working out how to dial in your scope, be them electronic bits and pieces in the way of ranging, in the working out distances, in both in apps or in GPS machine equipment, and be that in laser range finding. And now we're moving into Doppler radar and things like that, where you can go through and measure wind to a certain degree, and I presume that there's more things to come. Which in some senses is marvellous, and it's amazing what technology brings us. But I suppose there's a couple other angles that I'd like to look at to that conversation and make people aware of. One is, I suppose first and foremost, for those people who are stretching their budget as it is anyway and look at this sort of stuff, for some of them it becoming unattainable. Listen, that isn't the case. You don't need this stuff to do that thing. There is some stuff that's very cheap and very simple, and be that an app for your iPhone. Some people haven't got the iPhone or haven't got an Android, and that's not where they're going. Listen, it isn't completely necessary to go down that road by any means. And for other people who want to buy all the gadgets and want to spend more money and do that sort of stuff, and that's part of where they get, that's part of what they want to do. I'm very much a believer in there's no point dialing with or finishing everything with a giant pile of money. So spending money and advancing businesses and bits and pieces to create our capitalist world we live in. I very much agree with that side of things as well, but it isn't completely necessary. So the having to spend the money, you don't need to do, but really there is some really nice benefits to come with a lot of these apps, and it makes it easier. Whether that's simply measuring distance, rather than pacing out a 3,000 yard shot, being able to measure it and being able to verify it. As simple as an app, we use which I've been asked 100,000 times about, it's the virtual measuring tape for iPhone is what we use, but really it's just a GPS app. We use it simply because it's easy to show people. You can see it nice and clearly, but there's all sorts of golf apps and things like that, measuring things that's simply using GPS. And we verified it, yes, it works very nicely. Or you've got one of the nice GPS for hiking and that sort of stuff, a GPS unit you can properly use. And then there's a laser range finding, which lets you see things. Once again, for us, it's really a nice feature that what we use, the SIG, the 2400. It's the ABS 2400 or Kilo ABS 2400 unit. But really it's something that we can verify that and show that on video so people can see. But it certainly makes it handy to do that sort of stuff and verify your shot nicely. Not needed, of course. You can pace it, you can drive your car, that sort of stuff. Depending on your terrain, you can work it out, that side of things. But they certainly make it easier. And then into apps that you can get on your iPhone to working out your your shot, your firing solutions, that side of things. Put your data in and get your firing solution out. Nice and simple to do that sort of stuff. And I suppose there's two angles I'd really like to go with there. One is I do not like the concept of people completely relying on that side of things. It leaves you for the obvious comment is the battery runs out, that sort of stuff, you can't do anything. It's more than that in my mind, because I suppose the way I look at it, this is, especially our ELR staff, is a sport enthusiast. It's a hobby. It's pushing your boundaries and that side of things. It's not very practical in any real sense. It's not something that should be used for hunting. There is no zombie apocalypse coming, so it's not something to keep them back at bay. This is more, I suppose, in a few levels, it's certainly in pushing the boundaries and understanding more there, makes it more functional back in real side, in the real hunting ranges and that sort of stuff. I mean, any real military application or that side of things and that sort of stuff, maybe in a different world, we live in a different world, that'd be relevant. But in any real sense, they'll have a drone or they'll have a missile, have something else to go out those distances. So really it's more personal learning and personal understanding and growing that side of things and recreation. And on that level, I feel, at least my way of looking at doing things, understanding yourself and learning yourself, even though you can use these things to help you learn, and you go through the process of punching the numbers and seeing what that data is, or holding up a rangefinder and seeing what the distance is. In my way of looking at things, to the largest degree, you should also be getting used to being able to eyeball that, to be able to look and go, okay, listen, we've got it at those distances there, that's going to be at around 2000, and I can then check with my machine, whatever it is, to verify that side of things and start to learn that and start to learn other ways of doing it. But to actually set it up, to range it in properly, yes, you need all this sort of stuff. I get it, but what I'm trying to say is you should also be trying to teach yourself of letting it teach you rather than let it control you. So you learn from what you're constantly doing rather than rely on what you're constantly doing. Same thing for the app sort of stuff. Same thing for the firing solution. I know that I roughly am going to need, around the 150 minutes to shoot at around the 2,700 yards with my 6.5 Storm, or with the different rifle. I know roughly the information that I'm looking at. Now, getting it perfect, and I suppose there's a couple of angles I'll go with that. And for the one-shot hit in an ELR shot, the truth of it is, it doesn't really happen. It's not something that you're able to do. And it's not about getting better data. It's not about if you've got exactly the wind and you've got exactly this and you've got exactly that sort of stuff. Well, to a degree, yes, that is conceivable, but only in a theoretical sense, because you're never going to pick up all that information. There's no machine that's going to tell you exactly the pressure. There's nothing that's going to tell you exactly everything for that first shot, let alone the fact that we're humans, and our first shot, no matter how much we try, no matter how much you try and get everything perfectly, there'll be some settling, there'll be something else going on, be it the ammo, be it the temperature, be it the air pressure, be it the body, be it whatever it is, there's going to be something. So I suppose what I'm saying with that sort of stuff is that, yes, it's very good for recording data. Yes, it's very good to try and do this and in theory do this. But I suppose I get asked the question, why do you get so close on the first shot? To a degree, I get as close as a large amount of it is I basically done my maths in my head. I verify it with things, and then I use some intuition. I feel that, to me, looking at the conditions I've got, knowing the area, looking at the hills around me, knowing what the weather report was, the big part of the extra bit of the computer is me, guessing, to be truthful. It's intuition, it's educated guessing, but it's still guessing. And trying to get the data to do everything, I suppose I'd get into another feature there. There's the Doppler radar that they're talking about, which is a new rangefinder that's coming, that supposedly it's only up to 500 yards, so not very relevant for our ELR stuff, but you would presume that they'll get further and further. But this is a style of radar that measures the tiny particles in the air to see where they're going, to remember, to be able to measure, and I don't know if it's every 100 yards or it's every 500 yards, to tell you which way the wind's going. So what it'll ultimately end up doing when they get advanced enough at this is then give you a firing solution which includes a complicated wind component, trying to figure all that sort of stuff out. It's going to struggle, because forward and back movement of wind is just as relevant as side to side movement. So the end of the day, I suppose what I'd look at it is a miss is a miss. So if you've got a group holding down where you're just missing your plate at X distance, and that shows the group and how close you are. But if you're after a first shot hit, then a 1 inch miss is the same as a 20 metre miss. It's still a miss. So, and you correct according to what you saw. My way of looking at it is I've trained myself to try and know as much as I can without the machinery, without the apps and bits and pieces, to do as much as I can to come back into making that make sense. And I suppose where I'm coming from there is a little bit of fighting the whole world, I suppose, in the world of iPhones and algorithms and computers and that sort of stuff. I don't see it making our world smarter. I see it making our world, in most cases, dumber. People don't think for themselves. People rely on the algorithm. They rely on the program. They rely on their phone. We now have companies talking about cognitive behavioural approaches of dieting. It's actually getting your iPhone to tell you what to do. Which, yes, I get the whole world wants to go down that road and rely on something else. I see some pretty big negatives to that. And to me, to use this stuff to help us learn more about the real world, I completely understand it, completely agree with it, but only to the level where it's teaching me to know more about not using it as well as using it. So that's a little complex, but I hope I'm getting across what I'm trying to say there. There's another feature that I think is also very important about some of this stuff. Okay, so let me try and break that down. We have, as I said, lots of high tech coming into our world, and in theory, it's all going to make things easier for us. Now, there's the side of it that dumbs us down to where we're just relying on computer stuff, which I totally would prefer to find a way that it is helping us, but it's not taking away from us. So there's that side of it. But there's another side that I think we should be aware of. And that is a little bit about the advertising side of things, a little bit how companies put this stuff forward. And there's some of the ads and things I've seen over the years that are putting forward that you can get this stuff that makes it easy for anyone to go and shoot at extremely long range. And what they're trying to say is there's software, there's systems, whether that's an automatic sighting systems, and listen, I won't get into the particular products, but that what they're trying to say is it's that good that it's going to help you that much. So they're emphasising that statement by saying that you don't need to be experienced to go and do this sort of stuff. I see some big negatives to that sort of advertising. We live in a world where we're seemingly hell-bent on creating divisions, hell-bent on putting the minority in front of the majority, putting PC or woke in front of common sense. We live in a world that scientists' opinions, well, they become opinions. Scientific information isn't necessarily the real information. Statistic can be proving anything. We live in a world where university is the place where we should have free thought and I was going to say progressive, that's a bad word nowadays, but we live in the world where we should be taking every piece of information and assessing it properly in our universities. They're not doing that. That's not what's actually happening. So, given that, you give the wrong concept of there is equipment out there that any naive or inexperienced person can go and then shoot extremely long range, as much as us in the shooting world see the fact that, okay, that makes things more accurate, that makes things safer, and it's all the good side of it. There's another side of our world that are looking at that saying, wow, look what the firearms industry is up to. They're able to build a firearm that I can put in my 9-year-old or my 7-year-old son's hands and he can kill people that are a long way away. Or insurgents, or whatever you want to talk about. All the different ways of looking at the fact that, to me, there's two big negatives to the process of saying completely inexperienced can do this with how wonderful our software, how wonderful our system is. The two negatives are, one, exactly that. Exactly the message you're sending isn't the message that I would prefer you're sending. I think it opens a can of worms that's really hard to close. We don't live in a world where people think logically. That's the simple nature of it, of where we live. The other thing is that it's not true. These things can help, but unless for extreme long range shooting, there's a whole heap of other stuff involved. There's a whole heap of body of actual shooting form. Actually, the thing that we in the ELR world are all trying to do. We're trying to shoot better. This isn't just buy the stuff that can do it all. We're trying to be better at what we do. And I suppose that's where I fundamentally push forward, is that making better shooters, making us more consistent. In the theory of things, if we can do really well at 3,000 yards, then we can do really, really, really well at 100 yards and at 400 yards. And to the largest degree, yes, there is also the benefits of being able to shoot really well at a steel plate at 2,500 or 3,000 yards, which is going to make us better at hunting. So better at shooting at 400 yards and 600 yards for going out to fill the freezer. There is definitely that logic there. The truth of it is, what we're doing out there in our ELR shooting, and we're an extreme long range, in whether that's 1,000 yards or that's 2,000 yards or that's 5,000 yards, what we're actually doing is, although more exciting and though more interesting, it's not much different than what we're doing at 100 yards when you're shooting paper. So I suppose that's what I wanted to say. I would hope that people who are trying to sell stuff, and I get it, we live in a corporate world and they're trying to sell stuff and people are trying to pay the bills and they're trying to live life, and that means in our world in our capitalist world, you need to sell things, you need to put it forward in the best fashion. To try and do that, I think we want to be careful about what our message is. There's ways to say this. To drop the fact that you need to be an experienced shooter is a bad thing in my mind. It needs to be put forward, the fact you still need a lot of experience side of things. And for us, in all the other systems we're talking about, which are of great benefit, to keep in mind that we want to be improving ourselves. That's what my way of looking at it. We want to be improving ourselves. If we are completely relying on an algorithm, on an app, on a system, if we're completely relying on that, we're becoming more vulnerable, more exposed to, if that starts telling us lies and we haven't got enough logic to come with it. And I'm not talking about the corporate world trying to make us miss targets. I'm talking about the fact that there's something wrong with the algorithm, there's something wrong with the data we're putting into it, and we're not able to make sense of it because we're no longer knowing the fact that, okay, with this rifle, I'm going to need about this amount of MOA to shoot this far with this load, and I know that, and then my app doesn't tell me that. It's telling me something different. My double check is me. And that's where I suppose I would always say, my double check on all stuff, no matter what it is, my double check is supposed to be me. So as less experienced, have to rely on someone else, but ultimately we want to get to where this is where the buck stops, and we want to try and make ourselves as good as we can and as capable of doing that as possible. Anyway, listen, a bit of preaching, I get it. There's lots of good stuff to come from our high-tech world. But keep that in mind. Both the people who are selling this sort of stuff and pushing this stuff forward, keep in mind that there is not all on your side out there. The stuff we live in, everyone can watch this sort of thing. Let's keep it making sense in what we're putting forward. And for the people who want to use this sort of stuff, both the guys who can't really afford it, listen, not that important. You can get there other ways, and really the core of what you're trying to build is the same thing. The people who want all the gadgets and all that sort of stuff, for sure, I get it, I understand it. You know, the industry loves the fact that you can spend money on it like that side of things. So that's very good, but my advice is to make sure that you can get there without it, to use it to help you, to build you, rather than to limit you and make you rely on it. Anyway guys, enough of that. Thanks for checking in on us. We'll catch you next time.